My stepbrother forged medical records to ruin my vacation. But when I uncovered the truth, I exposed he stole $50,000 from our grandparents and now he's in prison for 5 years. I'm 23 years old. I'm in medical school, and I still can't believe that my own stepbrother did everything he did just out of jealousy and money. The thing is, this started as something that seemed super innocent, like a family vacation to Cambodia, but it ended with my brother in prison for 5 years and our family completely destroyed. And the worst part is that when it all started, I had no idea what was really happening. Let me go back a bit so you understand the context. My mom divorced my biological dad when I was like 7 years old. I don't remember much from that time, honestly, but I do remember when she met my stepdad, who is now technically my adoptive dad, but I still call him stepdad sometimes out of habit, you know. He's a doctor, a super kind and generous guy, one of those who never raises his voice and is always trying to make everyone happy. He has a biological son, Tyler, who is exactly my age, born like 3 months after me. At first we got along well, like we were kids and we played together, shared toys, those normal sibling things. What changed everything was when my mom got sick. It was cancer, stage 4, and everything happened so fast that we didn't even have time to process it properly. One day she was there, the next she was in the hospital, and within a few months she was gone. I was like 14 when that happened, and honestly it was the darkest moment of my life. But my stepdad, Tyler's dad, was incredible during all that time. He took care of both of us, never made us feel different, was always fair and loving with both. And when it was all over, he legally adopted me. He told me I was his daughter as much as Tyler was his son, and that he would never allow me to feel less than that. I cried for like an hour that day. I'm not kidding. Tyler and I stayed close during high school, or at least, that's what I thought. We studied together sometimes, hung out with the same friends. Things seemed normal. But looking back, I should have noticed some weird signs. Like Tyler was always comparing himself to me, you know? If I got a 9, he needed to get a 10. If I joined the debate team, he also had to join. At first I thought it was normal, like healthy sibling competition. But there was something more there that I didn't see. Things got tense when it came time to apply for university and specifically for medical school. We both wanted to be doctors, like our dad, and he had always supported us in that. The medical school entrance exam is brutal. I don't know if you know, but it basically defines your future. I studied like crazy for months, literally did nothing else but study, sleep, and eat. Tyler also studied, but not as much as me, or at least it didn't seem like it. When the results came out, I had passed on my first attempt. Tyler didn't. And that's when I started to notice that things between us were really changing. He got weird with me after that. He didn't talk to me as much, locked himself in his room, avoided family dinners. My dad was worried about him, obviously, but he was also super proud of me and wanted to celebrate my achievement. He organized a small party with relatives and friends, and Tyler didn't even come down from his room. I felt horrible, honestly, because I didn't want my success to be his failure, you know what I mean? But I also didn't know what to do about it. Like 6 months passed and Tyler said he was going to try the exam again, that this time he would pass. My dad paid for some super expensive private classes, like thousands of dollars, to help him prepare better. I offered to help him study, but he always said no, that he preferred to do it alone. So he took the exam again, and didn't pass either. And that's when my dad decided we needed a family vacation to relax and reconnect as a family. My dad had been planning this trip to Cambodia for months. He had always wanted to go, see the ancient temples, learn about the culture, all that stuff. And he thought of it as an opportunity for Tyler and me to spend time together and leave behind all the tension from the medical school thing. I was excited, honestly, because I had never left the United States except to go to Mexico once. And this sounded like an incredible adventure. My dad bought the tickets, reserved the hotels, planned the entire itinerary. Everything was ready. And then, like 2 weeks before the trip, Tyler came home with these medical documents. He put them on the kitchen table while we were having dinner and said, "Dad, you need to see this. It's about Zoe." My dad took the papers and started reading them, and I watched as his face got more and more worried. He asked me if I felt okay, if I had had any weird symptoms lately, and I was completely confused because I had no idea what he was talking about. Turns out the document said I had a super serious heart condition, like something that could cause a heart attack at any moment, especially with the stress of travel. And altitude changes and all that. I was like, what? Because I had never in my life had heart problems. I didn't even know something like that could appear out of nowhere. My dad is a doctor, right? So he started asking me technical questions, reviewing the reports, calling the supposed cardiologist who had signed the documents. Tyler was sitting there with this super convincing worried face, saying things like, I found these reports in your room, Zoe. Why didn't you tell us anything? And I swore I was going crazy because those reports weren't mine. I had never been to any cardiologist. None of it made sense. My dad tried to call the doctor who supposedly had done the studies, but the number didn't exist. He searched the name on the internet, and it turned out there was a real cardiologist, but he worked in another state, and when he finally managed to contact him, the doctor said he had never seen me in his life and that those documents were definitely not his. But by that time, my dad was already in total panic mode. He took me to the hospital. They did a ton of tests on me. Electrocardiograms, echocardiograms, blood tests, literally everything. And obviously everything came out perfect because I didn't have anything. But here's the weird part. Even though the tests came out fine, my dad decided it was better if I didn't go on the trip. He said that even though the new tests showed I was fine, he didn't want to risk it, that I should stay home resting, and they would go and bring me lots of gifts. Tyler immediately said he would stay with me to take care of me, like playing the concerned brother. But my dad insisted he go, that he needed to clear his mind after all the stress of the exams and stuff. I was devastated, honestly, because I had been waiting for this trip for months. But I also didn't want to cause problems or worry my dad. They left like 3 days later. I remember being at the airport saying goodbye to them, watching Tyler hug me and tell me everything was going to be okay, that when they came back, we were going to spend more time together. He had this weird smile on his face that I couldn't decipher at the time, but that now, thinking about it, was basically satisfaction because he had achieved what he wanted. I went home that day feeling like crap. I was alone in this huge house, with nothing to do but think about everything I was missing. And that's when I started obsessing over those fake medical reports. Something didn't add up, you know? Because even though the doctor had said they weren't his, the documents looked super official, with his signature and everything. So I started investigating on my own. I searched online for what real medical reports from that hospital looked like, compared fonts, formats, logos, everything. And the more I analyzed them, the more obvious it became that they were fake. But who had made them? And more importantly, why? Tyler and I shared the same floor of the house. Like we each had our room, but shared a bathroom and study area. I had never entered his room without permission, always respected his privacy. But that day, something pushed me to do it. I don't know if it was intuition or what, but I opened the door to his room and started searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I felt there had to be something there. I found the draft of the fake medical documents on his desk. Literally the word file on his laptop, which he had left open. The file was called something like Zoe Medical Reports Final, and when I opened it, I almost fell off my chair. They were exactly the same documents he had presented at dinner, with some corrections and changes he had been making. He had downloaded templates from the internet, had forged the doctor's signature using Photoshop, had invented every detail of my supposed heart condition. Everything was there, every lie documented on his computer. I sat in his room for I don't know how long, just trying to process what I had just discovered. My brother, the person I had grown up with whom I had shared everything, had forged medical documents to exclude me from the family vacation. Why? Just to have alone time with our dad. Was all that worth it? I was furious, obviously, but also confused and hurt in a way I can't even describe. And then I saw the diary. It was in one of his desk drawers, a normal black notebook. Part of me knew I shouldn't read it, that it was super invasive, but another part of me felt I needed to understand what the hell was going on with my brother. So I opened it and started reading. The first pages were normal, like entries about his day-to-day at university, complaints about professors, that kind of thing. But the more I read, the darker it got. He started writing about gambling. At first they were small, like $20 here and there in poker games with friends. But then he started betting larger amounts, hundreds of dollars, in online casinos and illegal games off campus, and he was losing. A lot. He wrote about how the excitement of gambling was the only thing that made him feel anything, how he needed that adrenaline rush to not feel completely empty. And then mentions of loan sharks started appearing. People who had lent him money to keep gambling. People who were now demanding he pay up. He wrote about threats, about how he was afraid they would hurt him, about how he had stopped going to classes because he was too busy trying to get money. And that's when I realized something horrible. Tyler had dropped out of college, not after failing the medical exam twice, but much earlier. He had stopped going to classes after his first year and had been lying to our dad all this time, making him believe he was still studying, still trying to achieve his dreams. The most recent entries in the diary talked about me, about how much he hated me for passing the exam when he couldn't, about how our dad always paid more attention to me, was always more proud of me, how I had stolen his father from him. He literally wrote, "She's not even his real daughter, and he prefers her over me. I need to take back what's mine." And then came pages and pages planning how to forge the medical documents, how to make sure I stayed home so he could have alone time with our dad and convince him to give him more money. I cried reading that. I couldn't help it. Thinking that my brother, who I had grown up with, had come to hate me so much was unbearable. But I was also angry, very angry, because how could he blame me for his own decisions? It wasn't my fault that he had developed a gambling addiction, that he had dropped out of college, that he had ruined his own life. I took photos of everything with my phone, the fake documents on his computer, the pages from the diary, everything. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with that information, but I knew I needed to have evidence. I put everything back in place, closed his room, and went to mine to wait for them to come back from the trip. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every day I woke up thinking about what I had discovered, trying to decide how I was going to handle the situation. Did I tell my dad immediately when he got back? Did I confront Tyler first? What would happen when all this came to light? Our family had already been through so much with my mom's death, and now this. I felt like I was about to detonate a nuclear bomb in the middle of what little normalcy we had left. Finally, they came back. I picked them up at the airport and Tyler hugged me like nothing, asking me how I felt, if I had taken good care of myself. My dad was also super affectionate, brought me gifts, showed me photos from the trip. Apparently, they had an amazing time. Visited ancient temples, ate delicious food. Tyler had been the perfect travel companion. And all I could think about was that all this had been built on a giant lie. I waited until we were all home, unpacked, and relaxed. And then, I said, "I need to talk to you guys about something." We sat in the living room, my dad thinking I was going to tell them about how I had been those weeks, and I let it all out. I took out my phone and showed them the photos of the fake documents on Tyler's computer. I explained exactly how he had made them, how he had forged the doctor's signature, how it had all been a plan to get me off the trip. Tyler's face went white as paper. My dad was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity, just looking at the photos on my phone, trying to process what he was seeing. Tyler tried to deny it at first, saying I had manipulated the photos, that I was lying, but I had too much evidence. I told him, "It's on your computer, in your room, we can go verify it right now if you want." And then he broke down. He started crying and admitted that yes, he had forged the documents. He said he was jealous, that he felt our dad paid more attention to me, that he just wanted to spend time with him without me being there. My dad was in shock, completely mute, and I watched as his face went from confusion to pain to disappointment. He asked Tyler, "How could you do something like this? Put your sister at risk that way? Make us go through all that fear and worry?" But I wasn't done, because I knew there was more, much more than just the fake documents. I told Tyler, "I also found your diary." And that's when he realized I knew everything. About the gambling addiction, about dropping out of college, about the debts, everything. His face went from shock to absolute fear. He stood up like wanting to leave, but my dad told him to sit down, that we had to talk about this now. Tyler tried to explain himself, saying the gambling addiction had started in high school, that at first they were just small bets with friends, but it had gotten out of control. He said that when he got to college, it got worse because he had more access to online casinos and people who organized illegal games. He had lost all the money our dad gave him for college, and when he started owing large amounts of money to dangerous loan sharks, he panicked and stopped going to classes. He had been living on campus pretending to be a student, but really he was just there gambling and trying to get money to pay his debts. My dad was devastated. He asked him how much money he owed. And Tyler said he didn't know exactly, but it was like $30,000 between all the loan sharks. $30,000. I almost fell off the couch. My dad had been giving him money regularly for college, for books, for expenses, all that, thinking his son was studying and trying to achieve his dreams, and it turns out all that money had gone directly to feeding a gambling addiction. Tyler sat there crying, apologizing over and over, but I could see on his face it wasn't genuine. It wasn't real remorse. It was just fear of the consequences. My dad told him they needed to talk more about this, that they were going to seek professional help, rehabilitation programs for gambling addiction, but that first he needed time to process everything, and then Tyler realized something. He looked at me and said, "What else did you see in my diary?" And I understood he was worried I had discovered something else, something I hadn't even mentioned yet. I told him, "I saw enough. I saw that you blame me for your own problems. I saw that you think I stole your father from you. But the reality is that you only did this to yourself, Tyler. Nobody else." And I think that's what finally broke him. He got up, yelled at me that I didn't understand anything, that it was my fault our dad treated him differently, and ran out of the house. My dad tried to stop him, but Tyler was already in his car, driving who knows where. He didn't come back that night. Or the next. My dad was calling him constantly, but Tyler wasn't answering. After like 3 days, Tyler finally sent him a message saying he was staying with his aunt, my dad's sister, in another part of the city. My dad was relieved to know he was at least safe, but I had a bad feeling about all this. Turns out my feeling was correct. Like a week later, Tyler's aunt, my aunt too, technically, called my dad super angry. She said Tyler had been staying with her for a few days, that she had been super understanding about the whole situation. But that morning she woke up and Tyler was gone. And so were the $3,000 in cash she kept in her house for emergencies. Tyler had robbed her. My dad went into total panic. He drove to his sister's house, confirmed that indeed Tyler had disappeared with the money, and they started looking for clues about where he could be. They called all of Tyler's friends they knew, checked his social media, everything, nothing. It was like he had evaporated. Another month passed. A whole month where we didn't know anything about Tyler. My dad was destroyed. Obviously worried about his son, but also processing all the betrayal. And then we got a call from Tyler's grandparents, my dad's parents, who lived in another state. They said Tyler had shown up at their house a few days ago with a super convincing story. According to what Tyler told them, our dad had decided to give me all his inheritance because I had passed the medical exam and Tyler hadn't. He showed them documents, fake wills, papers that supposedly proved our dad was completely disinheriting him. The grandparents, who are elderly and trust their grandson completely, believed it all. They gave him a check for $50,000 so he could start his life, since according to him, our dad had abandoned him. Tyler cashed the check and disappeared again. When my dad found out, he had to sit down because I thought he was going to have a real heart attack. Not only had Tyler robbed his aunt, now he had also manipulated and robbed his own grandparents using forged documents that made it seem like my dad was the villain. It was a level of a manipulation that none of us had imagined Tyler was capable of reaching. My dad made a Facebook post that same day. He wrote a public warning about Tyler, explaining that he had been manipulating relatives with fake documents, that he had stolen money, that if anyone saw him or if Tyler tried to contact other family members, not to trust him. It was super hard for my dad to write that, basically exposing his own son publicly. But he felt he had no other choice. He couldn't allow Tyler to keep hurting more people. We also filed formal complaints with the police. For the robbery of the aunt, for the fraud with the grandparents, for the forgery of medical and testamentary documents. It was a long list of crimes, and the police said there was definitely enough to prosecute Tyler if they found him. But Tyler had completely disappeared with the $50,000 and nobody knew where he was. Like 3 more months passed without news. Life continued somehow. I went back to focusing on my medical studies, trying not to let all this drama ruin my education. My dad went to therapy, trying to process everything that had happened. The relationship between the two of us got stronger, in a way, because now we shared this giant trauma. But there was always that question in the air. Where is Tyler, and what is he doing? And then we got the call. Tyler had been arrested. Apparently, he had tried to rob a house in the state where his grandparents lived. They caught him in the act, arrested him, and when they ran his name through the system, they found all the arrest warrants we had against him. The charge for the house robbery eventually got dropped because the owner decided not to proceed. But all the other charges, the robberies, the fraud, the identity theft against members of his family, those did move forward. The legal process was long and exhausting. Tyler got a lawyer, obviously, who tried to argue he had addiction problems and needed treatment, not prison. But the prosecutor had a huge list of victims, starting with his own aunt, his grandparents, and technically me too, because I had been affected by the fake medical documents even though not monetarily. Tyler's aunt testified about the robbery of the $3,000. The grandparents testified about the $50,000 and the forged documents. My dad testified about everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal. I also had to testify about the fake medical documents and all the emotional trauma it caused me, thinking I had a serious heart condition. It was hard being up there on the stand, seeing Tyler sitting at the defense table in his formal suit looking at me, knowing that this person who had been my brother my whole life was now basically a criminal stranger. The trial lasted like a week. The jury deliberated for 2 days. And finally, Tyler was found guilty of all charges: fraud, theft, identity theft. The sentence was 5 years in state prison. When I announced the sentence, Tyler broke down crying. But I don't know if it was because he finally understood the magnitude of what he had done or simply because he was afraid of going to prison. After sentencing, my dad asked to speak with Tyler before they took him away. The guards gave them a few minutes alone, and Tyler finally told him the whole truth about his addiction. He said he had started gambling in high school with friends, just for fun at first, but that the feeling of winning, that dopamine rush, had become addictive. When he got to college, it got worse because there was more access and less supervision. Every time he lost, he thought the next bet would be the one that would recover everything. But obviously it never happened. He got more and more in debt, started borrowing from dangerous people, and when the threats became real, he panicked and started stealing and manipulating his own family. My dad told me this afterward, crying. He said he felt guilty for not having noticed the signs before, for not having seen that his son was in trouble. But I told him it wasn't his fault, that Tyler had been super good at hiding everything, that he had lied and manipulated everyone, including me who lived in the same house as him. Tyler was sent to prison like 6 months ago. At first, nobody in the family wanted to talk to him. We were all still very hurt and angry. But then, like 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from him. It was long, like 10 pages handwritten. He apologized for everything, explained that in prison, he had finally started going to real therapy and Gambling Addicts Anonymous meetings. He said he understood what he did was unforgivable, that he didn't expect me to forgive him, but he wanted me to know he was genuinely sorry. I'm not going to lie. I cried reading that letter. Because despite everything, a part of me still remembers the Tyler I grew up with, who I played with when we were kids, who I studied for exams with. That Tyler still exists somewhere underneath all the addiction and manipulation, I think, or at least I want to believe that. I decided to visit him last week. It was weird. Very weird. Seeing him in that orange prison uniform, talking through a phone with glass between us. He told me he had been reading a lot, studying, trying to use the time in prison productively. I told him I was glad to hear that if he really wanted to change when he got out, I would be willing to help him. But he had to prove with actions, not just words, that he had truly changed. He asked me about my dad, if he could ever forgive him. I told him honestly that I didn't know, that my dad was very hurt, that all this had been a devastating blow to him, but that our dad is a good person, and that if Tyler really made an effort to change, maybe over time they could rebuild something. It wouldn't be the same. Obviously, it could never be the same, but maybe something. When I left the prison that day, I sat in my car for a long while, just thinking about everything. About how my family had been completely destroyed by addiction and jealousy. About how Tyler had thrown his life away for a temporary emotion. About how I almost lost the opportunity to go to Cambodia because of fake documents. About how Tyler's grandparents lost $50,000. About everything that was lost. But I also thought about second chances. Tyler has 5 years to work on himself, to really confront his addiction and his problems. When he gets out, He'll be like 28 or 29 years old. He'll still be young. He'll still have time to do something with his life if he really wants to. I mailed him some books about addiction and recovery, and also information about educational programs in prison. I don't know if he'll use them, but I want to give him the tools. At least. My dad is still not ready to forgive Tyler, and I completely understand. He says, maybe someday, but not now, that the wound is still too fresh. Meanwhile, he and I move forward. I'm in my second year of medical school, doing well, focusing on my future. He's working, going to therapy, trying to process all this in a healthy way. Sometimes I think about what could have been different. If Tyler had asked for help when he started having problems with gambling, if he had been honest about dropping out of college, if he had talked to someone about his jealousy and feelings of inferiority instead of letting them consume him, there are so many moments where things could have taken a different path. But they didn't. And now we all have to live with the consequences of Tyler's decisions. The only thing I can do now is move forward, finish medical school, become the doctor I always wanted to be. And maybe, just maybe, when Tyler gets out of prison, if he's really changed, we can rebuild some kind of relationship. It won't be the same as we had. It could never be. But maybe we can find a new way to be siblings, or at least that's what I'd like to think when I reply to his letters from prison.